All right, today we're going to talk about appositives and appositive phrases. Our essential question, why do we want to use appositives and appositive phrases in our writing? So let's first define an appositive. An appositive is a noun or a pronoun placed after another noun or a pronoun to identify, rename, or explain the preceding word. Preceding means the one that comes before. So let's look at some examples of appositives. The painter Pablo Picasso lives in Spain. I want to visit Spain's famous museum, the Prado. In both of these, Pablo Picasso describes the painter. The painter renames Pablo Picasso. These are identifying who the painter is or clarifying which painter it is. If we talk about the Prado, we're referring to the famous museum in Spain. There are lots of museums in Spain. We want to know which one we're talking about specifically, so we name it with an appositive phrase, the Prado. The painting, Guernica, impressed my father. Which painting? Guernica. An appositive phrase is a noun or pronoun with modifiers or describing words. It stands next to a noun or a pronoun and adds information or details. So Willa Cather, an American novelist, wrote My Antonia. An American novelist just identifies or renames Willa Cather. Notice how a novelist is a noun. We're using it to identify this noun, Willa Cather. And an American novelist actually gives us extra information about Willa Cather to help us understand as readers. Lisbon, a thriving port in Portugal, has often been the scene of espionage. A thriving port in Portugal gives us more information about Lisbon. But notice how there's a noun here, a port. That tells us what Lisbon is. Portugal tells us where it is. Okay? And then thriving tells us it's doing really well. And then the rest of the sentence tells us what's happening at Lisbon. Why are we talking about it? The shopping center, a network of cars, shops, and people, provides many jobs. And this is something that we didn't talk about specifically in class, but I do want to make you aware. See these dashes right here and right here? What those do is if you have a list of things, notice how we have this comma and this comma. Instead of having like 5 different commas, you can use dashes the same way that you use commas. We typically use them on things that are either really important that we want to stand out, or if your appositive phrase already has commas, like a list of things, then you might use a dash. And a dash is just two hyphens put together. Okay. Appositives and appositive phrases can be compound. So remember, compound sentences means 2 sentences put together. A compound word means 2 words put together to form a new word. A compound subject means 2 subjects put together. A compound appositive is literally just two things put together to describe one thing. 2 cities, a city in England and a city in Russia, describe or give extra information about the 2 settings. Then the 2 settings, a city in England and a city in Russia, are contrasted in the book. You'll also notice that if I take out everything that's between the 2 commas, so notice how a city in England and a city in Russia is also in black, that means that I can take it out and everything else that's left, the 2 settings are contrasted in the book, is a complete sentence. An appositive is not a prepositional phrase. Okay? Prepositional phrases are something different. We're going to learn about them a little later. Prepositional phrases don't get any extra different punctuation. They just get kind of thrown in. So if I said the boy with the broken arm is my brother, that's a prepositional phrase. We're going to talk about that next week, so don't panic. The boy, comma, the one with the broken arm. So notice how the one is talking about the boy. The one with the broken arm. The one with the broken arm and the boy are the same thing. Can I write it, the boy with the broken arm is my brother? Absolutely. It's just a simple sentence with a prepositional phrase. Here, the boy, comma, the one with the broken arm is my brother, is a simple sentence with an appositive phrase. I listed under complex sentences because it's a complex idea that you're taking this phrase and you're interjecting it in the middle of the sentence to describe the subject, the boy. Commas and appositives. When this word or group of words interrupts a sentence, it needs a comma on both sides. So that's sentence pattern 5. Sent, comma, interrupter, comma, ends. Riley, comma, my dog, comma, is gregarious. So when we have this appositive phrase, my dog, that describes or informs us about Riley, it clarifies who Riley is. We set it off in commas on either side. And that helps the reader to understand that if I take this out, if I take out my dog, then I should be left with Riley is gregarious. The exception, if it's just one word, one name, or a title, no comma is needed. Now I'm going to interject my Miss Naz philosophy here. I would rather have unnecessary commas in this case and make it clear to the reader than to not have the commas at all. Okay, so yes, technically the rule is if it's just one word, one name, or a title, you don't have to have commas around it, but for clarification's sake and for practice on the skill, I'm going to recommend comma on either side of the appositive phrase if it's pattern 5. So yes, they could say my dog Riley is gregarious, but for your benefit, just to make it clear, I would put a comma after dog, I would put a comma after Riley. This is one of the rules in English that I don't really agree with because it makes it really hard for people to know when to put the commas and when not to put the commas. So here's my Miss Naz advice, just put the commas. Commas are put around the appositive phrase because it's not necessary to the meaning of the sentence. So this is what I was talking about earlier. This means if you take the appositive phrase out of the sentence, it still makes sense. We still have a complete sentence even if I take what's between the commas out. For example, Riley, comma, my gregarious dog, comma, will jump up on his hind legs when he meets people. If I take out my gregarious dog, I still have Riley will jump up on his hind legs when he meets people. That sentence is bettered by my gregarious dog because now we know for sure that Riley is a dog and we're not thinking it's a cat or a horse or something else that has hind legs. So here are some examples from the book Tuck Everlasting. These are great mentor sentences. Anywhere in your books you should be looking and noticing when authors do this. Winnie, the only child of the house, never went there. The only child of the house renames or gives extra information about Winnie. It was May Tuck with her other son, Jesse's older brother. Now notice here the appositive is not describing May Tuck, it's describing her son. So now we're not describing the subject anymore as we did in the first example. Now we're describing the object of the preposition. We're describing another noun that happens in the sentence and it's happening at the end of the sentence. So therefore we have sentence pattern 6. This is the difference between 5 and 6. In 6, the appositive just comes at the end of the sentence. So notice how the only child of the house describes Winnie. Jesse's older brother describes the son. Then she stood and took from the washstand beside the bed a little square-shaped object, a music box painted with roses and lilies of the valley. On the left stood the first house, a square and solid cottage with touch-me-not appearance, surrounded by grass cut painfully to the quick and enclosed by a capable iron fence. So here we have a square and solid cottage with touch-me-not appearance. That whole phrase is describing the house. Notice how this phrase, even though it's long, is not a complete sentence. The appositive phrase is just a phrase. It's a group of words that doesn't have a subject and a verb. It's not a clause. It's not a sentence. So please be careful that you're not putting a sentence in your inside your commas. The last stains of sunset had melted away, and the twilight died too as he stood there, though its remnants clung reluctantly to everything that was pale in color. Pebbles, the dusty road, the figure of the man himself, turning them blue and blurry. So here we have the dashes. We use the dashes to set it off, just like commas. And we use that because look, I've got 2 commas here, and if I added 2 more commas, it starts getting really, really confusing. Notice how we also have this word to up here with a comma on either side. It means the same thing. If I take this out, I should still have a sentence. But in another part of her head, the dark part where her oldest fears were housed, she knew there was another sort of reason for staying at home. She was afraid to go away alone. The dark part where her oldest fears were housed is describing the part of her head that she's afraid of, that she was worried about. And at once, when she saw the 2 of them, Jessie with his foot on the pile of pebbles and Winnie on her knees beside him, she seemed to understand. Jessie with his foot on the pile of pebbles and Winnie on her knees beside him, that's a compound appositive. But notice how they're not doing anything in that little appositive phrase. There's no verb in there. It's just describing them. And it's describing the 2 of them. It's giving the reader extra information so that they can visualize what that looks like. So, if you were to do this, could you compare and contrast a prepositional phrase and a appositive phrase? Well, you will be able to after next week. But if you think about it, remember appositive phrases are set off with a comma, or with 2 commas if they're in the middle, 1 comma if it's at the end. And prepositional phrases don't get any extra commas, but we're going to talk about prepositional phrases next week. If you're still needing some extra help, I have one more small video that talks about mentor text and looking at appositive phrases.